So, welcome to everybody. Welcome to this ACE live event called Business and the Global Impact of the Ukraine-Russia Crisis. I'm Susan Dangar, and I am chair of the AmChams in Europe network, which I'll explain shortly. I'm also the CEO of AmCham EU, and I'm sitting here in Brussels. It's my great honor to be part of this network that stands together in what are extremely troubling times. Just briefly, I'm going to make a few words of introduction, but I would like to immediately welcome Andy, Iris, Mila, Tony, Yonuts, and Ronald. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us today, particularly Andy in these terrible times, and agreeing to speak on this topic. But before we start, let me just briefly introduce the AmChams in Europe network for those who've joined us today who may not be familiar with exactly who we are. So ACE stands for AmChams in Europe. Established in 1963, AmChams in Europe serves as the umbrella organization for 46 independent American chambers of commerce from 44 countries throughout Europe and Eurasia. We are completely independent, apolitical associations. In Europe, we represent the interests of more than 17,000 American and European companies, representing 20 million workers, accounting for 1.1 trillion in investment on both sides of the Atlantic. And as a bilateral voice of American and European companies, AmChams in Europe work to communicate the importance of the transatlantic economy in both Europe and the United States. Now, let's come to the topic at hand. 2 weeks ago, as ACE, we made our first statement condemning the war in Ukraine and calling for peace, and I would like to call that out. And as we stated, for those of you who may have seen the statement we made on the second day of the invasion, we said, the ongoing invasion of Ukraine violates international law and endangers peace and security across the region. It poses a clear threat to the fundamental values of human dignity, democracy, rule of law, and solidarity, which we all support. And our thoughts go out and continue to go out to all those who continue to be impacted across the region. Now, what we wanted to do today is host an event to have an open discussion about the current situation in Ukraine, and as well focus on the neighboring countries and the impact there. So, the objective being is to inform and to share. We hope very much that there's a microphone on from somebody. Thank you. If there's what we would like to do going forward, and we very much hope this will soon come to an end, but also have another event where we can share the views also from the Baltic countries and other countries bordering Russia. There are so many countries, it goes without saying, who are impacted by this war and this crisis. So with that, we are indeed joined by Andy Hunda, President of AmCham Ukraine, who will kick off in a minute. We're joined by Iris Lipai-Nagy, CEO of AmCham Hungary, by Yonuts Simeon, President of AmCham Romania. We have Mila Milarau, who is the Executive Director of AmCham Moldova. We have Tony Hush, who is the Chair of AmCham Poland. And we have Ronald Blasko, Executive Director of AmCham Slovakia. And each of these countries have different challenges. Of course, we're going to cover refugee problems, employees, impact on business. We are chambers of commerce, so we will be focusing also on the business impact. So with no further ado, we're going to ask to Andy to speak. I will go through the others. There will be a chance to put your questions in the chat. We very much hope to get to some of those, but I will be going through everyone and then trying to have a conversation. So Andy, first of all, our thoughts go out to you. We're doing, as a network, our very best. Many of the chambers here and everyone on this line should know in assisting in the humanitarian effort, but also supporting you as a chamber and your colleagues. And we would like to continue to do so. But let's hear from you, Andy. Some of the challenges you face. How are the team? Where are you? Give us some facts. Thank you, Andy.
Well, thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everybody. And on behalf of AmCham Ukraine, I'm very indebted and grateful to everyone for this opportunity. I am today in Bratislava, in the capital of Slovakia. I would like to take this opportunity to thank especially AmCham Slovakia for putting us up and looking after us. Exactly 2 weeks ago, we woke up with the air sirens blaring in Kyiv. We got into the car and we drove west. The first city we stopped, we thought it was safe, but then we woke up in the morning and the airport was being bombed there. We moved further west, and with the air raid sirens continuing, and then we looked at where to go further, and we looked where is the closest AmCham office to Ukraine, and that was Košice on the eastern border with in Slovakia. And we are very grateful to AmCham Slovakia for the assistance in helping us find place and using the office and using the facilities. At the present time, we are still finalizing where we will be, but we are looking at Košice as a base at the moment. It has we're very close to the border, it's an ideal place at the moment. So the first thing we do every morning is we contact the whole team to check that everyone's alive. We have a check-in, we have groups, because we, at the moment, we still have employees, staff that are in Kyiv or in the region. We have one member of staff who is in the town 20 miles northwest of Kyiv, who is, which is being shelled every day. We are in touch with her, and we are looking to get a humanitarian corridor out of that town, hopefully today. So it's really making sure that everyone's alive. We have 19 employees that we have 12 employees that already have crossed the border. So there's 3 of us in Slovakia. We have a couple in Denmark, one in Belgium, in Poland, a few, and in Hungary. And I think it's really now trying to understand, where we go from here. I'm very grateful to all the AmChams for the support, and especially Mila. We had one case of one of a very large American company whose employee was pregnant and she lost the baby. And then Mila and Elena went to the hospital in Chisinau in Moldova to bring her fruit, and because she couldn't leave with her husband. So it was a very human and a very, we are seeing real humanity. And I'm extremely touched by the support of so many wonderful people. And I think, moments like this, they really do show humanity. I think moments like this also show brutality. We've seen the events in Mariupol yesterday, when a maternity hospital was bombed by the Russians, and children in the rubble. So I think it's, the humanity and the brutality of war is something that we are learning. Our main focus is the team. We are making sure that everyone's safe. We are paying salaries, we've prepaid salaries. We are looking at financial continued support for all of our team members, and to see, where we go from here. We were at an event today, AmCham Slovakia, and one of the questions was, how long do we think this is going to last? The answer is, we don't know. We were on a call with Suzanne Clark and former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates 2 days ago, and his view was things are going to get worse before they get better. So I think that's really where we are at the moment. So our number one priority at the moment is the safety and security of the team. We do have one of our leadership team members who is 7.5 months pregnant. And again, we're looking how to move forward with that. We're in touch with the US government on a regular basis. We are, again, Košice is a good location for us because we are close to the team, the US embassy team. And, it's keeping this dialogue and communication open with members. We are getting numerous requests from members that they are either fleeing the war or those that are still operating. In terms of legislation, it's things like the banking sector getting the licenses for the data centers and servers to be moved out of Ukraine, but we need special legislation from that, either physically to another country or onto the cloud. So, there's still very much going on. The humanitarian drive is something also, we are coordinating with. It's really putting people in touch, because there are so many good people that are donating, but then it's really joining the dots. How, if you've got a warehouse full of goods, food or sanitary products, it's really how do we get that delivered? And that's something, we are focusing more and more on. We are in touch with the government in Kyiv. on a regular basis and keeping those connections. Again, thank you everyone for the Starlink. I think this Elon Musk, the fact that he switched on the satellite to cover Ukraine now, which is extremely important because we do think that the communications can go down any minute. The Russians have bombed the television tower in Kyiv, but so far the mobile networks are up and the internet in most cities is running. The 3 mobile operators have launched a national roaming. So what that means, if one of the networks goes down, they can automatically go onto another network. So I think the communications is something we really rely on. But the next step would is getting these terminals for the Starlink in so that we can continue communication if in the event if the internet or the mobile network goes down. We are speaking to many companies. Many companies have come to us, hundreds that have closed down their business in Russia. We support that. We're very grateful. I think this is a real sign of the fact that now is not the time to be working with a pariah regime in Moscow. And I think the companies, you've seen the lists, and there are hundreds. The McDonald's decision yesterday, we were very much directly speaking with them, the banking system, across the board. So I think that's something. And again, we do support that. And I think, we are speaking to other members, ones that are still sitting on the fence. And, I think the question will be, how will they be justifying because of the war crimes that we are seeing that being announced by the British government today against Russia. It's really being able to, how will they justify this in future in terms of why that they continue to work. But again, our number one priority is really to stop this killing. We don't know how long we're in this for. It's the safety and security of our staff, our members, your colleagues, and especially the companies that are on this call today. Many have colleagues in Ukraine, so I think it is saving the preserving the lives. In terms of I think the latest number was nearly 2 million, already over 2 million of people fleeing the war. We are looking at legal status, so we are working with lawyers already to understand what is the legal status. In many of the neighboring EU countries, anybody who's crossed, they can register with the local employment bureau, and they can start working with the work permit. So that's also something we're discussing with member companies. But the fact that we don't know how long we're going to be out, here in exile, it's really trying to understand. But I think, I would like to again take this opportunity to thank, we feel that we have real guardian angels, and the guardian angels that are looking over us is the AmChams in Europe, especially being able just to pick up the phone and ask for, someone to help, either a member company or one of our staff. It's sometimes, just advice, people left with one bag of personal belongings, and ending up in a country where many don't speak the language, don't understand the country, or it's the first time they ended up. So I'm extremely grateful for this network that we do have of this wonderful network of AmChams in Europe. And I think we are the lucky ones to have you, and I'm eternally grateful to you for that. I'll probably cut off there, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Andy, thank you so much. You cover a lot of ground in where I know, and we've heard you before, you could easily talk for an hour on this and give even more details. I think importantly, and we'll come back to you afterwards if we may, Andy, you can see the number of people on the line here. You're talking to the AmChams, to member companies, to a wide range. I think everyone's hearing you. I certainly heard clearly, communications is absolutely essential. Just so everybody on the line here knows, the AmChams in Europe network does have an initiative to fund the Starlink masts or terminals that you called out for. If there's anyone else on the line who would like to help fund that, please just contact directly the AmChams in Europe network, and we would be delighted to assist you with that. But yeah, I heard you say very clearly, Andy, and we support you on that. Number one priority here is stop the killing. So with that, Andy, we'll come back to you. I would like to just to give a different perspective here, and which is the aim of this, is some of the challenges, you know, relatively to what you've been describing, could be considered as less, but this of the brutality in the bordering countries. And go to you, Tony. So Tony Husz, as I said, is the chair of AmCham Poland. Maybe just in a few minutes here, Tony, can you just give us a flavour of what's the challenges for Poland there? How are you seeing things? And maybe again, we are Chambers of Commerce. What's the impact? How is business coping with this? Over to you, Tony.
All right. Well, thank you, Susan, and thank you very much, Andy. I'm delighted to share a few thoughts from Poland today, and I know that time is short, so I'll try to move quickly. And if something's not clear, Susan, just give me a shout. It's a very busy time right now, of course, in Poland. Today alone, we have Vice President Harris here. We have Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada here. So very high-level meetings going on, including one of them taking place about 200 meters from where I'm at right now. The real, though, key, I think, is that right now, depending on which number you want to use, we have about 1.5 million, possibly 1.6 million people that have crossed the border, that have been displaced by this terrible conflict and are being welcomed into Poland. It is no mean feat to try and absorb that many people in such a short period of time, to provide them housing, make sure they have food, get registered. But I think the Polish government has responded very quickly. An additional piece of legislation was passed just today. So basically legalizing a minimum of an 18-month stay in Poland, where they will have a national identity number, they will be eligible for benefits, they'll be eligible for education, they'll be eligible for national health care. And that way those who can get to work. And we've heard this from many people who have been displaced, that they want to contribute. They don't just want to be taken care of. They want to help take care of themselves and their family members that they have with them. So that's a very important step, and as Andy mentioned, the borders are open. Anyone who comes in, you don't need your COVID certificate. I mean, lovely to see it. You don't need documents. So, an enormous amount of people have been able to come in. The vast majority of people, as many of you have probably heard, have been settled with families or been settled in accommodation. So as at this point, there's not what we might traditionally see in such a thing, camps per se. So they're trying to get people dispersed. One of the things that's helping that is we already had, depending on the number, 1.5 to 2 million Ukrainians already working in Poland. So that's a tremendous support network. So friends, family, people willing to help, people willing to translate. But I think the response of Polish society has been tremendous. Certainly our member companies are deeply engaged in humanitarian relief, in logistics relief, including playing a role in helping get some of the Starlink terminals into the Ukraine that were discussed. And certainly I can say from AmCham Poland's point of view, we fully support that, and we will do what we can to make sure that there are more Starlink terminals. I couldn't agree more that continuing communication is going to be important right now, not only to mitigate impact of the conflict, but also just to be able to deal with humanitarian issues and frankly begin to make plans for when we can think about how do we rebuild, how do we sustain and build resiliency. Very quickly, just as an example too of what's going on here in Poland, make it also easier for companies to participate and help. The government has passed a regulation, so 0% VAT on donations for anything related to relief for displaced people, as well as aid going into the Ukraine. I think that helps keep some people who think like, well, I want to help, but if I'm a small company, maybe I can't afford the VAT hit later. So I think that removes some of that doubt. But an important thing, I think, too, as well, is the U.S. government here is also helping reassure U.S. companies and U.S. investors, saying there is no travel warning on coming to Poland, indeed to the other countries here in Central Europe that are part of the NATO family, and that we're open for business, and that business is going to be important, not only in maintaining our current economic situations in the countries that are hosting our friends from the Ukraine, but also providing a good base so we can look forward in terms of future rebuilding. The other thing we have been encouraging as AmCham and working with our partners in U.S. government is letting companies know if you have good news, if you have things you're planning on doing now is the time to go ahead and announce them. Don't keep them in the drawer. We need to make sure that people know that our companies are committed to our employees here, to our operations here, and to our ability to play a positive role going forward. So we're trying to make sure that people have the message, that we're all in. And ultimately, I think that, as we continue to coordinate closely with USG and a lot of fabulous, not just US, but particularly Polish humanitarian organizations, we're trying to make sure we get aid and logistical support, not only to the people who are displaced here, but as long as we can to support direct transport of humanitarian aid and supplies of whatever might be needed into the distribution channels inside the Ukraine. And one thing I'm very proud of that AmCham that we've started to do is now we are realizing we have companies that are providing trucks and drivers. We have a lot of companies providing things. However, there's only so long that these local companies can pay for the ever increasing fuel bill. So one of the things, for instance, we're focusing on is make sure that we're keeping tanks full so those trucks can keep going into the Ukraine and deliver that aid as close as possible to those who need it. So it's certainly not what we thought we would be spending our time on a few weeks ago. But we're happy to do so, and we look forward to continuing that support for our partner companies that are in the Ukraine, and also work together with our fellow AmCham. So Susan, Andy, thanks so much, and open any questions if you have them.
Yeah, no, thanks. So thanks, Tony. I think just to pick up on a couple of things you just said. I think very important are the stories. I've heard that as well, sitting here in Brussels and from US governments. If business is on the line here, come up with your stories of whether they're good investment stories in the region, how you're contributing. These are really useful to show that absolute solidarity with bordering countries, with Ukraine. So come forward with those, share them with your chambers so we can put them out there. I think one other comment just to show here as well, which I think is really important at the moment, is the unity on this. So if anyone on the line is in doubt, sitting here in Brussels, the unity of Europe with the US on tackling this crisis together is outstanding. In fact, never before has the unity been so long, and never before, I should say, has European US leadership been as important. Thanks for all the great ideas, and look to the other speakers as well. I think this is fantastic to share ideas of what everyone can do here. I'm actually going to go to Romania, to our other president. We have two presidents of the chambers, and I'm going to come to my colleagues. So maybe we can turn to you, Ionuț Simeon, also because you've got a slightly different perspective. I heard that I know you're going to give more of a business perspective. I know you had a recent meeting, I understand, with yesterday with the Deputy Secretary General of NATO. So maybe you can add a sort of different element to the discussion. It'd be very interesting to hear from you. Thank you, Ionuț.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a great event that helps all of us to be together and learn from each other in order to help Ukraine and the Ukrainians who are really going through very difficult things. I have to join Andy and to express our deep emotions for the trauma and tragedy the Ukrainians have to go through as a result of Russian invasion in Ukraine. Now, listening to what has been said already, I will just mention what we have done. It's captured in three directions. One, in connection with helping refugees who go through the border of Romania. And currently we have more than 300,000 refugees going through Romania, close to 350,000, of which close to 100,000 remained in Romania. The second thing is about helping AmCham members, first of all, to understand what is going on from a geopolitical point of view. And I will make a quick reference to some of the things I can disclose about our discussion yesterday with Deputy General Secretary of NATO, Mircea Joană, but also offering our members the exposure to understanding what would be the macroeconomic implications of the current political crisis. And here I would, we have a series of experts and famous macroeconomists to give our members a good understanding on that. And also, last but not least, we are here to help the government to take the appropriate measures to, if you want, improve the business environment, first to absorb the people of Ukraine who decides to stay in Romania and to wait for better times, but also to create the proper infrastructure for those companies, especially US companies that intend to relocate their business from Russia or temporarily from Ukraine, and to be closer to their original, let's say, roots in this part of the world. And also to alleviate the concern that foreign companies, like Tony said, may have in continuing their investments in a country like Romania, which is very close to the border of Ukraine. Now, back to what I said, for us, the first day of the conflict, we have seen an overnight change of the landscape and the perspectives of what is going on. And as a result, we have encouraged our member companies to help the Ukrainian people either through direct in-cash contribution or in-kind donations. We have worked with our members to organize transports over the border or to offer host to our colleagues from Ukraine in Romania. Now, for us, it was very important to understand what is going on. And actually, in the discussion we had yesterday with Mircea Joană, my personal take was that this conflict will not be, I wouldn't say it's here to stay, but will not be away very soon. Actually, it may last from 4 to 6 weeks or to few months from now. And from what I learned reading the press today, it looks like the peace talks in Turkey didn't bring an expected result. However, we all hope that this will continue and eventually reach an agreement. Now, for us, it is very important to make sure that we are making helping our members to understand the economic conditions. Right now, it's inflation. Right now, we talk about shortcuts in the logistic and chain of supply of goods. And there is a serious concern that Romania is too close to Ukraine, can be part of this war. And also investments are actually to be on hold. And like Tony said, this is the moment to announce whether there are intentions to continue investment projects. We encourage our members or the potential investors to do this, because Romania, like any other member, NATO member country or EU member country, it is safe. We don't believe that this conflict will expand to our countries, and therefore we need to help companies who wants to relocate, have to relocate their business from Russia or temporarily from Ukraine to be here. And as part of this, I would say Romania, luckily, it is not so well connected with Russia. Actually, we are on 17th place in terms of, in EU, in terms of being, let's say, dependent on their oil and gas supply. Also, we have basically no Russian banks in Romania, which makes Romania, let's say, safe and stable in terms of continuing doing business. Now, for us, it is important to help the government understand what to do in order to facilitate the integration of Ukrainian refugees in the economy. And for this, we are constantly working with them in implementing the legislation which has been I think approved yesterday or the day before yesterday. And right now we are working on designing and how can I say, tailoring the Invest in Romania agency in order to be able to answer questions from those companies who are interested in locating their businesses in Romania. As you know, Vice President Kamala Harris is visiting today Poland. Tomorrow will be here in Romania. And we would like to make sure that our voice about the fact that Romania is a safe business environment will be heard and will be passed on further. Now, in conclusion, we are here to help Ukrainians and Ukraine, and we are happy to continue our efforts to help refugees to have a place to stay until a peace will take place again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ionuț. I think, again, very clear messaging, certainly, but again, this is specifically the perspective of bordering countries with regard to the dangers here of companies no longer wanting to invest in the region, which is in no one's interest at all, no one in Europe, nor that of Ukraine. So again, let's move on. I'm Iris. Let's move to Hungary. and see what's, I know you've got some quite specific challenges and some quite interesting points with regard to impact on supply chains. And perhaps you can pick up on some of that. I know you came up with some examples the other day. Iris Lipai-Nagy is the Executive Director, CEO, I should say, of AmCham Hungary. Welcome, Iris.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, and welcome, everyone. First of all, our thoughts are with Andy and the team, and of course with the people of Ukraine. So I would start with the humanitarian side. Just repeating what Tony and you said, Hungary, both the government and civil organizations are aligned to help the refugees. There are more than 200,000 people who already are in Hungary, but as we understand, the majority of them are going to go to other countries. Nevertheless, those who want to stay, there was a regulation passed by that they are entitled to work. The work permit will be given in a very short period compared to the original 45 days. And they are also entitled to all the healthcare services, what are Hungarians entitled for. 2 years ago, the government set up a consultation platform. It was the time when COVID broke up, when impacted ministries and chambers are meeting each other every week. So the platform is reopened last week. So we have a direct link to decision makers to suggest what the economy needs as a result of the crisis, and also to look at how to integrate the people into the labor force, those who want to work. Big question is how to take care of the children. So they are also entitled to be included in public education. Here the question is the language. So now the special language teachers are on place to help the children. And companies are also entitled to get subsidies who are ready to provide childcare for those people who are ready to work. In terms of the economy, what I can say that Hungary is a safe and being part of EU and NATO, just as Poland and Romania, we don't believe we are going to be impacted on the ground by the war. So we welcome any company who want to relocate. Nevertheless, what we see, as any other country can see, that those supply chains which were already badly hurt by COVID are impacted at a great deal. Hungary is very strong in the automotive industry. We can see that the automotive industry and tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers are already hit. I had one company calling me a week ago asking how we can speed up Ukrainian people to be enrolled in the workforce. The same company calling me that this week they have an issue because they can't produce any longer because raw material hasn't arrived. The good thing is that the government does everything to replace all these supply chains from other countries, although we know that all these other suppliers are bombarded by other companies as well. What we can state as well that inflation was already above 5% before the crisis. Now we are expected to increase in the forthcoming months, and we could face the devaluation of the Hungarian currency, which hit a record price last week, 400 forints per euro, which we have never seen before. Now it has strengthened again, but we don't think it is going back to where we were before the crisis. So in a nutshell, this is what I can say, and of course we are very open to any question, and we will do our best to support the colleagues coming from Ukraine, and we try to have them as much as we can.
Thank you so much, Iris. Again, interesting angle there, again, on the supply chains of, on the one hand, as you said, companies looking to employ workers, and then now thinking about shutting down because of the not being able, having access to raw materials. So this is, everyone is affected by this, absolutely everyone. I'm going to stick with the EU country, go to Slovakia, where Andy is sitting now, but to my colleague Ronald Blasko, and just for a couple of comments, and then Mila, we're going to finish with a different angle because we have Moldova on the line, and then if anyone does have a question, please just put it in the chat, and we'll be And if anyone on the panel will then like to comment on what their colleagues have said, I think that's how we'll finish up at the end. Ronald, over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Good afternoon, everybody. As has been said already, we are glad to provide, our office and our help to our Ukrainian colleagues who are with us in Košice as well as here in Bratislava. Regarding the situation, overall situation here in Slovakia, I would say, there are two streams of help. We are trying to help refugees coming to Slovakia. Maybe just to give you the proportion, so far 165,000 refugees crossed the border with Slovakia. Of course, the majority is probably moving further west, but still it is approximately 3% of our population. And these people require immediate, care. So there are plenty of children with mothers who are crossing the border, as well as young people. So they need accommodation. We, as a country, were not really used to be a destination for immigrants. On the contrary, in the past, quite many Slovaks left the country. When there was a Syrian crisis, there were a few hundred refugees in Slovakia, but now we have, as I said, 165,000, which is really a huge, a burden on the public administration, which is compensated by the effort and willingness to help of the private business, NGOs, as well as by AmCham and our member companies. Then the second stream is trying to help Ukrainians who are still, back in Ukraine. So the government is trying to ship vital supplies of food, of drugs, medicine, bandage, but as well as ammunition. So there is help to the Ukrainian army, and we are proud of it. And then coming back to those who are here in Slovakia, there is a very positive attitude. I might call it, there is some kind of action, take home your own Ukrainian. I know a couple of people who have already not just one family, but they provided accommodation to several Ukrainian families. So one family is coming, then it's leaving, another one is coming to the same apartment, which is unbelievably, generous contribution to helping alleviate the crisis. Then many volunteers are going to the border, trying to help the state officials to navigate, the people, to provide help, what is really needed. So we are also trying to get these people back to normal life if it's possible. That means those who want to stay here, we want to provide some decent accommodation. That means it's much better for them to be with families than just some dormitories, and also getting kids to kindergartens and to schools. So there is already initiative. 2 days ago, I was with the government office discussing how we can turn recovery and resilience facility fund into helping Ukrainian students, providing them, some financial support, providing them with scholarships so they can study here in Slovakia. And one really meaningful contribution, how the government is helping all the people who are coming to Slovakia, who are registered, are providing with health insurance, and they have already a work permit. The last week, we held already the first webinar on employing Ukrainians within our member companies. There was very strong interest, 2 days before we actually held the webinar, 40 companies showed interest. They sent their representatives. They try to find out what kind of procedure is needed to be followed so that they can employ Ukrainians. Of course, we do not expect that all the Ukrainians, especially if there are mothers with kids, will be able to work. Nevertheless, we have thousands of vacancies on the job market, and we would like to provide, some kind of platform which can match, skills with which are on demand, as well as those which are on offer. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to share with you. I'm ready to take some other questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronald. I think we're going to Normally you're going to need 2 hours to answer, to go back. We could do with a seminar for each and every individual on this call. But yeah, great to have these different angles for the jobs and the skills piece. How are we all going to cope with that? And we can all indeed help. Mila, just a few minutes, just to sum up. I know you've got a completely different political situation there. Probably you can just give the audience a little bit of a feeling from how you're feeling in Moldova. And then we're going to use, if you could just take just 3 or 4 minutes and then we'll move on.
Yes, thank you, Susan, for organizing this session. I believe that communication is extremely important in this period of time to express our solidarity, our humanity, as Andy mentioned, and of course to share some valuable pieces of information. I will offer very, very brief economic and political outlook of my country, given that the Republic of Moldova was probably not on the interest radar for many of today's 500 participants, impressive number. Moldova is a very small country, 2.6 million population with quite poor economic performance, neighboring Ukraine to the east and Romania to the west. And here we have Transnistrian region at the border with Ukraine that has separated almost 30 years ago. The process supported and backed by Moscow. And since then, Russian soldiers have stationed in the region and until present days. That is why the invasion of Russian army in the Ukraine has generated real panic and fear of potential Russian aggression in Moldova. So soon after the invasion, our president, Maia Sandu, also declared a state of emergency in our country, ordering the closing of Moldova airspace and immediately opening borders for refugees. It is worth mentioning that though Moldova's neutrality is in its constitution, on all occasions, Moldovan officials had reiterated its strong support for Ukrainians' sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I think that our president was among the first regional leaders to condemn this unjustified military aggression to Ukrainian people. So now, after 2 weeks of the war in the region, as according to many, including Chisinau officials, we believe there are no signs of potential military aggression from Russia to Moldova, and that's good news for our country. However, we have no clear signs of de-escalation of military actions in Ukraine, things that have been stated by the previous speakers, which will maintain the increasing inflow of refugees to Moldova. Well, since the beginning of the war, more than 220,000 people crossed Moldovan border. More than 80,000 stay in Moldova. We have seen unprecedented mobilization of Moldovan population, government, and business and civil society to help. This has brought us Moldovans suddenly in European and international attention. We have got many volunteers greeting refugees at the border, helping them to find shelter, organizing transportation, including for those who wish to travel onward. There are many useful informational resources that we are ready to share. Ukrainians can get a job here without special permits, and we know that this is already happening. However, we understand that these people are quite confused and they would need more time to be productive at any job. I'm very proud for the members of AmCham Moldova. They were very engaged and cooperative with authorities, with international donors, with diplomatic community to put together funds and assistance for the refugees. But of course, we are almost at the limits of administrative capacity. And of course, we are welcoming the assistance that will be deployed from the West. So to refer very briefly to the economic consequences of the regional crisis to Moldova, though the situation is highly fluid and it is too early to foresee the full impact, should the conflict escalate, the economic damage may become very significant. From preliminary feedback I have received from AmCham Moldova members, main concerns to focus on are, first of all, people anxiety. It takes a lot of effort for managers and business owners to calm down their employees, to stop them from leaving the country, and to maintain them productive. Moldovan companies allow people to work remotely from abroad, which is very important for employees. We as AmCham are trying to be helpful by fighting fake news, and we help our companies to clarify certain situations before the official news appear. Investors and foreign business owners are being also very worried for the security of their employees and their assets in Moldova. And of course, the clients are worried for the sustainability of supplies from Moldova. So we believe that communication in this format and other formats is extremely important to maintain the interest of investors in this region and to discourage companies to leave Moldova or to put serious projects on hold. The other factor is, of course, the scarcity and supply disruptions. For countries as Moldova with close economic links to Ukraine and Russia, this is an obvious challenge. We are not as lucky as Romania, though we have reduced our dependence to Russia, and now the majority of the exports are going towards the European market. We still have impact of the involvement in Russia on our economy. Odessa seaport was an important logistical hub for Moldova also, and of course the energy prices we remain to be heavily dependent on Russian gas. So Moldova will need to develop its energy resilience. Yeah. This is all, unfortunately, not a lot of time we have at our disposal. Thank you for giving me this.
No, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Mila. Like I say, I think, and actually be interesting from the audience, you know, we're open to anything here. If there are people on the line who want to delve more deeply into one specific region or country, AmChams in Europe, we can certainly do more of these so that there's more information sharing and delve, for example, do something more focused there. But for now, I'm going to stop there because I'm sure that Andy, I don't know whether Andy wants to comment on anything. I would just like to put one question out before we take it further. I can see some questions in the chat, but due to the fact that one of the common themes I heard coming up was about companies relocating, and the fact of sort of, you know, it's helpful to the companies, they're helpful to the Ukrainian companies, helpful to the states to whom they're locating. Has anyone heard, it's a question I heard coming in here, is there going to be more of a priority to help those companies relocate to those countries or states who are actually joining the efforts on sanctions versus countries who, and I don't know which countries they may be, but there are some countries maybe following the sanctions, others less so. Has anyone heard on this line whether there is going to be a more favored approach, a more encouragement to those states abiding by the sanctions? I mean, Andy, maybe you might have heard something, you might have a view on this. Perhaps I'll turn to you first and for any other comments that you might want to make.
Thank you, Susan. Regarding the relocation, I think it is the knock-on effect that some of the members are seeing, especially in countries like, you know, Irish mentioned the automobile industry, that some factories are having to close because the parts that came from Ukraine can't make it. I did just see a question in the chat regarding the key industries that have been hit. Well, I would say definitely agriculture. I just had a call literally an hour ago with a congressman from the US, and they're concerned about, you know, food distribution and the risk. You know, Ukraine has been #1 in the world for sunflower oil, sunflower seed. It's big on grain, it's big on corn. So the biggest issue now really there is to get the sowing season in, because if that gap, that window is missed, so I'm learning as we go on when corn is sowed, when each of the crops is sown. And I think, you know, the commodity price, soft commodities is definitely going to have an issue. And then just, you know, one other thing that just I remember is, you know, we did get requests both from our team and the members. I think what is an extremely deficit here now is all kinds of helmets and bullet resistant vests. I mean, we're talking about non-lethal aid, So I think especially if, you know, our employees and company member companies' employees are in an area that's being shelled, I mean, these are things that could tangibly save someone's lives. And again, you know, I think I am extremely grateful to all the AmChams. I think this network we have has been absolutely brilliant. I'm very grateful to the US Chamber in Washington. I am in touch with Susan Clark and Marjorie and the team there. That they've been amazing. So again, you know, I want to thank everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I mean, just in general, if anyone does feel, just regard to that specific question about whether there are, or maybe it should be something that's done, you know, easier to relocate to a country that is supportive of the sanctions rather than a country that isn't, then please let me know. But I would like to, I see a question there. There are a few there. I'm not sure we're going to be able to cover all of them, but I think these are probably of interest to everyone. You know, which industries, well, you just covered that, Andy, agriculture, you said, but are there any specific industries that are most affected by the Ukraine crisis? I mean, I've heard in my dealings, certainly, you know, those requiring on this supply chain and raw materials, the car industry, for example, some of those factories seem to be sort of coming to a halt. They just cannot get the raw materials. So any of you have a comment on that? And there's a question here, if there is a diplomatic agreement between Ukraine and Russia, do we think that this will normalize some of the prices of the raw materials? So does anyone want to comment on, anyone else want to comment on industries most affected? I mean, maybe go back to Poland, maybe, I don't know. Tony, if you're still there, and or Andy, Tony, any comment on that?
Yeah, well, I think certainly we are potentially looking at some disruptions in supply chains. However, I think, you know, it's early enough days that as tensions mounted, I think that some steps were taken to mitigate some of those. Now, how long those mitigation steps will continue to be in effect and be useful, plus alternate supply chain methods. But I think that one of the key things actually, you know, going forward is maybe not for the immediate supply chain and in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing and various things, but to consider the fact that Ukraine is the source of a number of very key basic raw materials, and some relatively rare. And so going forward, that could drive prices, could drive challenges within supply chains. But I think that I'd also like to touch very briefly on the steps taken that for companies that need to relocate people, that need to relocate operations, in some cases, you know, production or distribution, that we've been working with the Polish government, with their agency for trade and investment, about locating facilities, locating places, trying to at least ease that path forward. And I think it's also important to remember, I think that certainly the frontline states around Ukraine look at this as, you know, not purely as a benefit to our countries and our economies, but we need to be able to preserve capability, talent, and skills for the rebuilding of Ukraine post-conflict. So I think that I've already heard several people say, oh, well, you know, some of these countries, you just want to take the best workers, the best jobs out of there, and say, yes, for the time being, we do, because we need to preserve them. We need to preserve that interest, that investment in the region. But I think all the government folks I've talked to, both from Poland and the Baltic states and with USG, also see that this is an important business continuity issue to being able to help reinvest into a free and independent Ukraine. So that it's part of the long game, but I think it's also not to confuse short-term benefit to neighboring countries with the fact that people understand that the ultimate benefit is to get everything back as much as we can into our neighbor.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Tony. I don't have any, again, if one of the panelists wants, we don't have too much time left, comment on that. I think overall, indeed, as this is we're talking to a business audience, most likely primarily, the narrative of business is a tricky one in many respects at the moment. You know, not being self-serving. You know, who are we helping? And it's tricky to get it right. Sometimes it's hard for business to get that quite right. I think many are scrambling. But indeed, the storyline that you said there, Tony, I think is an important one, that ultimately it is to help the region, and ultimately it is also to help Ukraine rebuild, and the region needs to stay strong. I see there was one question there on the last one on encouraging, to Andy's point, Ukraine's neighbors to activate agricultural partners to increase. I mean, whether it's the neighbors, I mean, I happened to hear on the news this morning, certainly in where I'm originally from, the UK, they're doing exactly that. They've started, you know, fallow land is being resowed. I mean, this may be something for any country here, you know, encourage your governments. This is not just about neighbors. I think it's the entirety of Europe. Everyone's been depending on the bread bowl of Ukraine and Russia. So maybe every country needs to think about that. I'm just going to see, does anyone here, because we packed a lot into this, would anyone like to come back in, whether it's you, Yonuts, I think you had, whether it's the NATO piece, just to make a short remark, go around, comment on anything that's been said, or any of the questions in the chat?
Yeah, two quick comments, Susan. One thing with regards to the industries, textile industry, apparel industry, processing of agricultural products would be something to relocate temporarily from Ukraine in neighboring countries. With regards to an information which I believe it's important, it is estimated that the number of refugees in the next weeks will be in the range of 5 million. So right now there are 2+ million, but it's expected to be 5 million. And according to one official who declared the worst is about to come now, because until now, at least in the Romanian part, were those who had means to relocate themselves somewhere else in Europe or wherever. But right now there are going to be people who are really dislocated from their, you know, homes, and they need a place where to stay. So this is more than ever required efforts on our side in order to be able to help them with what we can.
No, thanks, Jon. It's very sobering indeed. It's probably, yeah, maybe some of those who have managed to get as far as Brussels, or those who've been able to, and then we're going to see those more very much struggling just to get out of the country. So I think those on the network, certainly we stand ready to help as far as we're able to. Anyone else, just in the remaining minute, let's just go around quickly. I'm going to end with you, Andy. Iris, any last comment that you would like to make, something you want to stress, pick up on, anything we've missed?
The only thing is that, you know, we are really prepared to take as many people as they flow into the country and try to have them, both the government side and the civil organizations. And we will do our best to help those who are in need.
Okay, thank you, Iris. Ronald, would you like to make any sort of last comment or no? Mila.
Yes, I have seen the comment from a company speaking about the possibility to relocate people in other locations so that they can continue their work for the Ukrainian company. I think it is also possible to do it in Moldova. We have some companies, they have both offices in Kiev and in Chisinau, so they have relocated their Kiev people to Moldova. And yes, they just get in touch with us, and we will offer the information, and we'll see what we can do so that they can.
Okay, thanks, Mila. Actually, just in general, I'm going to go to you, Tony. I see Jonas has got his hand up, then finish with Andy. ACE Secretariat, if anyone wishes to contact anyone here, contact the ACE Secretariat. We can give you their contact details if you want to specifically ask questions to any of our panelists. I'm sure they'll be open to that. Tony, any last comment from you?
The last comment I would say is that, you know, one of the things that we've talked about with our USG and Polish government partners, as well as our EU interlocutors, is, look, this is a long haul issue that we're in right now. You know, we all want an immediate cessation of hostilities. We want the killing to stop. But the rebuilding, the need to care for displaced people, to integrate them at least temporarily into our host societies, is going to be a long-term thing. So we also need to think about how we structure business support, how we structure government support, so that we don't end up with donor fatigue, support fatigue, and we understand that, look, ultimately this is going to be a longer term issue in order to have the optimal outcome, and sometimes the longer game is the better game, so that we don't do things that create either domestic populist reaction to long-term displaced people, et cetera. So I think it's really important that business also weigh in to say, look, we understand this. and we're willing to, support and play our part, but be part of that dialogue, because unfortunately, people's attention spans are relatively short. And, we don't want a situation where we have an end of hostilities and then a few months later, people are saying like, oh, let's move on to the next thing. This is a long-term regional issue. And I think that it's important that not just our AmCham business, but all of our domestic business partners in our host countries are also on board with this. So
no, I agree. Very good point, Tony. And I've heard this word donor fatigue as well. We've got to keep it going. So that's very important. We're running a bit over time. I see 2 hands up, but I really want to finish with Andy and be respectful of the audience here. Jonas, did you have?
I'll be quick. The one risk
quickly,
which was raised by Mircea Joana yesterday is about cyber attacks. So our member companies should be very much aware of the risks that are posed to them in the coming period. So we should increase our vigilance on that matter.
Absolutely. In conversations we've had here with US government, cyber is like top of the agenda. So yes, everyone should note that. And Ronald, very quickly.
Very quickly, thank you. I would like to say that, during the last 2 years, we have the second major crisis for which we were not prepared. So it is really up to us also to talk to the government or to our governments and to get, this kind of crisis solving mechanism in place to be as a society ready, because there are more crises coming. And we should also think about, future in more strategic terms, to reconsider geopolitical risk. This is something which is a major concern for many CEOs. And I think we should also play a role in that direction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. Andy, final word, and then I'll conclude.
Well, on behalf of all of our 45 staff and our members, I'm just so grateful to this network. I want to thank everyone. And I really do hope that one of our next AmChams Europe annual conference and staff meeting, I invite you, and I hope we can hold it in Kyiv.
Andy, that we all are praying and hoping for that as well. Let's keep that on the top of our list as something to aim for. So with that, I just to conclude here very briefly, I think we've heard a number of issues we can follow up on. Communications from Andy, absolutely key. We need to stay in this for the long term, the long haul. Absolutely. I think that last comment made about we can't afford to have fatigue here. We need to support our companies, support our employees, wherever they may be. The strength of the region is absolutely vital, also for the strength of Europe and for the recovery of Ukraine. So let me just finish with 2 things. One is, let's go back to the statement that we made, which we did as 46 AmChams. I should say it did exclude AmCham Russia, but everyone else indeed, of course, signed up to this, which is standing for those fundamental values of human dignity, democracy, rule of law, solidarity. We stand together. And with that, any ideas, feed them through, whether it's to me personally here at AmCham EU in Brussels. We're trying to do our bit, as Andy knows. The ACE Secretariat in Slovenia, I'd like to thank my colleagues there. Andy, I'd like to wish you well. Your throat sounds a bit dodgy, so stay well. We can't afford for you to lose your health. We need you and your colleagues to stay strong. Thanks to everyone for joining. Do join us on the next one. I really hope this has been valuable and useful. We're all in this together. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.